I was recruited to come to the VA as a social work associate. Just talking with some of those veterans and hearing some of the stories, and even now when I look back and think about some of the experiences that some of them had, just hearing all of those things, I decided, I think I will be a whole lot better equipped to work with this population of individuals if I look at joining the military as well, especially considering that this was a family history as far as I was concerned, having grown up with everybody going to the military. The thing that was different, I think, about my enlistment was that I was older than my drill sergeant. I was older than my company commander because I had lived certain life experiences that other recruits had not lived. I had 2 children. They were 13 and 15. I was prepared because I already knew that so much of it was a mind game. I was picked on daily, and so I had to learn to laugh at myself. And they say dropping by me some real estate, and I'd drop and buy some real estate, and I'd still be laughing, Finally, I heard my drill sergeant say to my company commander, who I'm sure had said, "You need to go on and get her out of here now. She's not going to make it." And I heard him say to her, "I can't break her." I can't break her. I think I went from being here at home with 2 kids to being in a unit with 40. And because I was the oldest, I became everybody's mama. I was the first squad leader, which meant I had to be responsible, in essence, for everybody. Making sure everything was done, making sure the barracks were clean, just everything, the responsibilities that go along with it. Fort Jackson had started transferring over, so you had one part of Fort Jackson that was called Hollywood, and you had the other part of Fort Jackson that was the old World War II barracks that were called Tank Hill. Well, I was on Tank Hill, and on Tank Hill, they didn't play. Hollywood was co-ed. Mm-hmm. Tank Hill was not co-ed. So you were not allowed to look across the street at any of the male recruits. You were not allowed to speak to any of the male recruits. Not that I could talk to them anyway, since I was married. But to be in a place where you are completely cut off from the outside world, where you are not allowed to listen to the radio, you're not allowed to listen to TV, you are, your only contact with the outside world is that 10-minute call that you get once a week that you have to stand in line for, and if the person doesn't answer the phone immediately, then you just lose your turn. And I had been in Bravo Company when I was at Fort Jackson, but when I got to Fort Sam, I was in Foxtrot. I had been promoted and as a sergeant, where you have to take over and be responsible for so much and so many, even more so than just being the first squad leader. A lot of the things that I perhaps knew, but because it was combat-based and field-based, there was a lot that was so different. The thing that I really remember about Fort Sam, aside from the training and all, was just the life there in San Antonio was just so different. And during basic training, you don't see anything. You see nowhere but the base. The main thing that I remember was just trying to stay away from the red ants. San Antonio is just full of jackrabbits and red ants. The training itself, I really enjoyed. It was a change, and not as much field training as during basic, and not as much of a combat focus. Because you were more focused on your specialty areas. The National Guard was different. Once you get there, most of your time is split between garrison and being out in the field. Just all depends. You do 24-hour duty, you may as well say, in the Army. Everything is outside, so there's nowhere to go after 8 hours. You're still there, and you're still working. You're fighting with the insects and the bugs. And I remember one day we were standing there and we watched a snake come up out of the hole and crawl across our commander's face. Huge snake. And of course, we couldn't say anything because we would startle the snake. We, being a medic, all of our services were provided out there with the in the heat with the tents rolled up on the side, and you're just sweating and going through the whole bit. That was the biggest change for me when I switched from the Army National Guard to the Navy Reserve, because field training meant field training. When you went to your hospital, your field hospital, in the Army, your field hospital, you have your huge GP extra large tent, you're the sides rolled up, and you're depending on the trees for your air, you know. When I went to the Navy, they were complaining about the field, and then, okay, we get ready to go to the hospital, and you look in this huge white tent, and you walk inside, and everything is white, and the floor is white, and the sides are white, and there's air conditioning vented into the tents. It was such a contrast between those two branches of service, just looking at the basic training component of it. The training itself, I think, was consistent, both branches. Of course, everything is very methodical, and there's a specific manner in which you do everything, whether it's breaking down your M16 and putting it back together, or putting on a bandage, or whatever it is. There's a method to everything that you do. But just the manner in which the two branches operate, to me, was just such a contrast. The biggest thing in the Navy, of course, was having to get down in the tank and you know, holding up bulkheads while they flood you with all of this water and trying to keep from drowning. While in the Army, everything is on the ground, and you're running and you're fighting, you laying in animal trails, you know, trying to get in fighting position, and you know, those types of things. I'm glad I had both experiences, because it showed me how differently they operate, but also the reality is that the focus is different, so you know, that's justifiable. My master's degree was in social work. Actually, it worked out really well, because I came out and I had the opportunity to be part of the initiation. The first PTSD unit was open during the year that I was doing my year of training as an intern at the VA. I was able to stay at the VA because of the different components and the breadth of opportunities that they have there. So I worked in medical, on the medical units, but I worked on the admission psychiatry unit, which also was the beginning for the post-traumatic stress disorder programs. To be able to see where it was then to where it is now, where it is highly recognized in terms of the diagnosis of PTSD. Looking back at those earlier veterans that I knew back when I was working on the nursing home care unit and some of those other units who clearly had PTSD, of course then they called it shell shock or whatever. So we started working on in those areas, and we were part of national committees, so I was involved with the development of the first protocol book for working with the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program. At that time it was homeless, chronic, and mentally ill, before it was changed over due to the stigma attached to mental illness. So we, ahead of any legislation for housing or for employment at the national level, we had VISTA volunteers who were doing that work here in Little Rock. So we were ahead of the curve when it came to actually having individuals working on those social issues that go along with homelessness, and that are factors that often contribute to homelessness, such as unemployment and lack of housing. By that time, the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Veterans Affairs had implemented the first collaborative relationship between two cabinet-level agencies. Of course, VA by that time had been granted cabinet-level status. Jackson State was still under the AIRS program, the AIR suit from civil rights suit. So at that time, I was able to go to school without having to pay tuition as an AIRS grantee. Because we did not have a doctoral social work program here in Arkansas, I was also able to get, the interstate common law waiver. I can't remember what it is now, but it allows you to not have to pay the out-of-state tuition if there's a program in another state that is not available in your home state. So I was able to do that and work as a research assistant as well to try to help cover everything. After I finished my classes, I continued to go as if I was still going to class every day, because that allowed me to study and work on my dissertation rather than staying home and being distracted. I was able to complete what typically takes people 8 years to complete. I was able to complete the program in 3.5 years. Coming out of the military, you have a sense of camaraderie that's there, and oftentimes you lose that. And that's one of the things I try to talk with some of the young veterans about is becoming a member of a veteran service organization, because I think it's very important to that sense of sisterhood and brotherhood that you achieve during the time you're active duty. But being a member of a veteran service organization, and of course American Legion is the largest service organization in the country, and we're just celebrating our 100 years this year. So it's been so meaningful to me.